everyone to another program of Immersion School. Today I have the honor to talk with Bobby from Global Wealth Protection. And thank you for being here, Bobby. It's a pleasure. So can you begin with a bit introduction about yourself and what exactly you do with Global Wealth Protection?
Sure. And thanks, Alejandro, for having me today. My name is Bobby Cassey. My company is Global Wealth Protection. Little bit of background about myself, and then I'll get into the company. I live in multiple countries. I've got 2 home bases, going on 3, actually. It looks like this year we'll pick up another home base in a 3rd country. My main home primarily is in Latvia. I also have a place in the United States, which I spend a minimal amount of time, but I do have a home base here, and then looking to pick up a 3rd home base in Mexico this year. I have been a digital nomad, let's say, or location independent. I've been a location independent entrepreneur before the term digital nomad existed, so more than 20 years. And I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've had multiple companies. In fact, I haven't actually had a job since I was 19, and I'm 47 now. So I haven't actually had any job since I was 19. I've never had an actual professional job. I've always had my own companies in different industries and that sort of thing. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family where I was raised kind of in the mindset of having your own business. So for me, I was fortunate in that regard to be raised in that kind of mindset. As far as what Global Wealth Protection does, it's basically we do tax and residency solutions for location independent entrepreneurs. Our tagline is internationalize your business, your wealth, and your life. And so we help people who are interested in living, let's say, out of the lines, so to speak. And what I mean by that is the systems in place today, the governmental systems, social systems, banking systems, that sort of thing, they're designed in such a way that we live between the lines, if you understand what I'm saying, right? So if you're from Miami, you live in Miami, you have a job or a business in Miami, you have your home in Miami, your bank accounts are in Miami, maybe you've got some investment properties or something in Miami, but everything is within the lines. You're abiding by the systems that are designed. And the problem is, those are kind of old paradigms from the industrial age, whereas we now live in the era, the technological era, the technological age, so to speak, where we have a lot more freedom of movement. We have the ability to live and work and live our lives all over the place. Literally just this morning, my wife and I were discussing where we want to live over the next couple of years. Like, where do we want to spend our time? And I asked her, I said, if everything is ideal and everything is perfect, where do you want to spend your time? And she just looked at me, she goes, I don't know, everywhere. And I said, okay. I said, well, what does that mean? And she said, well, we could live here for a while. We need to be in North Carolina for some period of time, a few times a year. We can go back and forth, a few months at a time in Mexico, that sort of thing. And if you think, this was really like 20 years ago, this was not really, well, it's not that it wasn't possible. It's just that it wasn't very practical and cost effective because, 20 years ago, if you traveled to another country and you came home and your cell phone bill would be like $5,000, right, for the month while you were gone. Because that's not practical for somebody who is a small business owner, an entrepreneur, or a freelancer, or a solopreneur. That might be possible to have that $5,000 phone bill if you're an executive for a huge company and the company's paying your phone bill. But as a solo entrepreneur or running a small business or doing freelancing, come on, you can't endure $5,000 a month phone bills on a regular basis. But technology over the past 15 years has improved so dramatically that we have the tools at our hands that we can, and not only entrepreneurs, but even employees now. I mean, you look at what's happened over the past year during COVID, we've got even like General Motors, one of the oldest stalwarts of industry, basically announced, I don't know, some few weeks back, that all 30,000 of their office workers are now remote. They're now working remote. And that's General Motors, one of the most boring industrial companies. Yeah, most conservative, boring industrial company in the world. And they're on board with this remote work thing because technology makes it easy. And so now we have the ability to do this, and it just kind of makes things a bit more interesting. So anyway, I guess this is kind of where we are now, and these things get more complicated from a structuring standpoint because, like I said before, the governmental and the social and the banking systems are designed around this old paradigm. And if you don't believe me, go to your bank and say, I want to open a bank account. And they say, where do you live? Well, I don't really live anywhere. I live a couple of months here and a couple of months there. And they say, well, tell me about your business. Well, my business is completely virtual. I have an e-commerce store and I outsource, my warehousing and fulfillment. And they say, well, where's your office located? Well, I don't really have an office and all my workers are working remote. And what happens is you're outside of those lines. You're living outside of the lines of the systems and they don't know what to do, right? It breaks their brains to think like, obviously there are some businesses coming to terms with this now and some banking and stuff, but.
Yeah, actually a friend was asking me about that because he asked me, well, how someone can know about all the legal regulations in every country, the taxes in every country. I mean, who I can work in this situation if I'm living 3 months in one place, 3 months in another, and should I work with a big company like KPMG or I don't know, one of the big firms, or because it's really hard sometimes to know the legal and immigration things in every place, and they are changing all the time. So maybe it's not too hard, for example, for people in the US going, I don't know, maybe to Asia or things like that. What do you think about that? Because it's how you solve it, or about all these specific topics.
So I do get this question a lot. Like people ask me because I do a lot of tax planning for location independent entrepreneurs. And when I say tax planning, I'm talking about we kind of address their current situation and optimize their situation to minimize taxes. So maybe we discuss residency, how and where to get residency to optimize their personal situation, how and where to register their company so they, have the best situation. But what I don't mean by tax planning, I don't do like bookkeeping, I don't do accounting, I don't do tax filings. I work with a lot of accountants where I can recommend you to somebody for filings, but that's not what I do. I do the strategic planning side. And so people ask me this all the time.
Like a kind of advisor in some way.
Yes. Yeah. And so you bring up a good point, like KPMG or PwC. Yeah, you might be able to go to them, but they don't want to work with you. They don't care about you. Their fees are so high. First of all, you probably couldn't get them. You probably couldn't work with them anyway, but their fees are so high. They actually target global, international companies with a global reach, and maybe they have like some very high net worth individual clients that they help because that's their target audience. They don't want to work with that small to mid-sized entrepreneur who is running an e-commerce store, like the Canadian guy running an e-commerce store in North America living in Thailand. They don't want to deal with that because it's not their target. And it is complicated because just using that as an example, you got a Canadian guy with an e-commerce store in North America, selling in North America. and he decides to live in Thailand. Where does this person structure their company? I mean, do they just do a Canadian company because they're Canadian? Do they do a U.S. company? Do they do some offshore company, whatever? And so these things get complicated. And I get this question a lot, like, how can you, asking me the question, how can you possibly know all these systems, like governmental systems everywhere in the world? And the answer is, I can't. It's impossible. But what I know is how to exit the tax system of your home country. So, for example, Alejandro, you're Spanish. If you came to me and said, "Hey, I want to leave Spain and not be a taxpayer in Spain, and I do, let's say, consulting, and I want to travel the world or whatever," I can work with you because I know how to exit the Spanish tax system. I don't know how to optimize your situation living in Spain. I'm not the person you call for that. You need a local accountant or a tax lawyer in Spain for that. But if you need to know how to get out of Spain from a tax standpoint, that's what I can help you with. Or the Canadian that needs to leave Canada to go live in Thailand while running his e-commerce business in North America. I can help that Canadian because I know how to exit the Canadian tax system. But when it comes to how to optimize a business or a structure within Canada, that's not what I do. Now, as far as immigration goes, that gets a little complicated as well. Number one, because immigration is constantly changing. I mean, literally, we've seen in the past year a massive amount of change in immigration laws. We've got countries like Panama that have made it much harder. Well, it doesn't take effect for 2 more months, but Panama has made it much harder to become, they've raised the limits for their friendly nations visa. We've got other countries that have raised their investment, like residency by investment programs. Some of your countries like Cyprus have eliminated their citizenship by investment programs. And then we've got other countries like some of the small island countries like Barbados that have created these digital nomad visas that make it like super easy to go to places like that. So immigration's tough. That's something we just have to keep on top of and offer the options that we know about. And then sometimes, I get a client that says, "Hey, I'm really interested in X." And then we have to go out and research the topic to get the answers for them. It's impossible for us to know everything. I mean, there's no way to stay on top of that. But we know the general idea. If you are location independent entrepreneur and you're wanting to live outside of the country where you were born, we know how to help you move in that direction and exit your home country to minimize your tax burden in a high tax country, and also how to help you avoid becoming a tax resident in a high tax country. So, like, for example, if I were and I'm targeting you a little bit on this, but
Okay.
if I were a Spanish person, one of the last places on earth I would move to claim as my residency is the U.S. And I say one of the last places. From a tax standpoint, it actually literally is the worst country on earth to become a tax resident. Of all 200 plus countries, the U.S. is by far the worst country on earth to become a tax resident of.
Can you give a bit of more details because you think it's the worst, the U.S.?
Because the U.S. is one of only 2 countries in the world, what I call a tier 4 country. They are a citizenship-based worldwide tax system. So now I say citizenship, but from a tax standpoint, a green card holder is the equivalent of a citizen from a tax standpoint. So if you come and become a resident in the U.S. and you have your green card and you say, "Well, I really want to leave the U.S." Well, it's not so easy to give up your green card. I mean, you can, but some people are like, "Man, I worked so hard to get this green card. I don't really want to give it up." But the problem is, even if you leave, you're taxed on your worldwide income, and it's a tax trap that's hard to get out of. And the taxes are high. I mean, you've got federal tax, then you've got your state income tax in most states. You've got your self-employment or your social taxes. I mean, people don't think to add these up, but it's one of the highest tax countries in the world, and also one of the worst ones to get into the tax trap, because once you're in, you're in. Whereas like a Canadian, if you're Canadian and you say, well, I've got my Canadian passport, but I don't want to live in Canada anymore, it's super easy to give up your tax residency. But you can still be a Canadian citizen, but you give up your tax residency. It's super easy. But the last place in the world I would want a Canadian to go when they give up their Canadian tax residency is the US. Because then it's like, what's the saying? You're jumping out of the pot into the fire, so to speak. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Not from a tax standpoint. Now, of course, there can be other reasons you choose to live in the US, maybe opportunity reasons, job reasons, personal family reasons. I'm talking purely from a tax standpoint.
Yeah, because I interview many people that are here in the US and they come to create their business because venture capital the opportunities in venture capital are bigger. It's more possible to grow your company, maybe to sell it. But from the tax perspective, I don't know if this is the best way, because it's like having a partner in the 40 or 50%. It's insane.
Correct, yeah.
Actually, if you put all these numbers, like 5 years you live in the US and all the taxes that you pay, maybe you have for 1 or 2 houses. I mean, for a good engineer or someone like that. So it's a bit insane, no? So
well, but like you say, like a lot of people come to the U.S. for the opportunity, but see, we do live in an environment now where you don't actually have to live in the U.S. to access the opportunity of having a business in the U.S. You don't have to live here. You don't have to have a green card. You don't have to have tax residency in the U.S. I mean, depends on the business, of course. If you're going to open a chain of brick and mortar stores like hair salons or retail outlets or a plumbing business, it's going to be difficult because that has what we call nexus, a physical connection to the location. But if you are selling some products like online, I mean, it's super easy to be in e-commerce in the US without actually living or being a tax resident in the US. Or if you're selling digital products or software company or anything that can be done remotely, the US is still a great place to do business, just not to live and pay tax. Okay. Like if I were, because right now we do live in an age where even big companies, like we mentioned before, even big companies, they're not even like maintaining office staff anymore. It's not even necessary. Like you could still have a company here. You can still have your workers or employees or contractors here. And, depending on the nature of the business, like if you could come and go like on a tourist visa, maybe you could come and get your work done a month at a time and go live somewhere else.
Yeah, because right now, for example, with the COVID situation, I don't know if these are your kind of customers or ideal customers, but many people went away like for a year. Even some people couldn't come back to the US because they were in India or a different location. So how this affects to the tax things, because I mean, it's possible to live abroad while you have a resident in the US. I don't know. I'm asking.
Well, I mean, technically speaking, if you get you mean like with a green card? You're talking about the green card
holder, yeah.
Yeah, so technically, if you get your green card and you're out of the U.S. more than 6 months, they can revoke your green card, 6 months and a day. Now, I know during COVID, they've been giving a lot of exceptions to this, like people who, let's say, you mentioned India. Let's say you were Indian and you were in the States living on a green card, but then you went back to India, maybe for family reasons or something. They've been giving exemptions to these people for mainly because of COVID. I don't see that as being a long-term strategy, but if you have your green card though, I mean, you're still taxable in the US because it's the same as being a citizen from a tax standpoint. You're taxable on worldwide income. So if you left the US on a green card and went back to India and you're earning money or you're running your business or whatever, you're technically still taxable in the US.
Yeah, and probably they have more complications because you have been more like half of a year in another country. I don't know how you are going to be taxed because
Well,
Spain, for example, have also high taxation. So I know they have the agreements between different countries, but in that case, it can be weird because you are still tax resident in the US, but you are living abroad in a place that you have to pay also taxes because you have been more than a half of a year. So it's going to be more complicated. So I suppose that many people have this kind of situation that it's not easy to, and many people don't know what to do. I mean, even the experts sometimes even don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, so like, for example, let's say you were Spanish and you had a green card and you went back to, let's say, Madrid or something, and you're in Madrid or in Spain for more than half a year. Well, now you're actually taxable back in Spain again, because most of Europe, the rule is if you're there 183 days a year, you're a default tax resident. Most of your European countries are like that. There's a couple of exceptions, but so you would technically owe tax in Madrid, or sorry, in Spain on your worldwide income. But then there's a tax treaty between Spain and the U.S. So you would pay your tax in Spain. You would file your tax return in the U.S., but then you would submit proof of payment of your tax to Spain, and then you would get a tax credit, what they call an FTC, a foreign tax credit, back in the U.S. So let's say in this case, for example, let's say you paid. Let's say you made 100,000, and let's say the tax rate in the U.S. is 30%, and the tax rate in Spain is 40%. And let's say you paid 40,000 in Spain, and you owed 30 in the U.S. Well, you would take a tax credit back in the U.S. and you wouldn't owe anything because you paid more than the 30 already to a country with a tax treaty. But if it was flipped the other way, if the tax was 30% in Spain but 40% in the U.S., you would pay 30,000 in Spain and take a 30,000 tax credit in the U.S., and then you would pay the difference, the extra 10 you would pay to the U.S. Now that gets way more complicated if there's not a tax treaty, like let's say Pakistan, for example. Let's say you were living in the U.S. on a green card and you're from Pakistan and you go back to Pakistan for 6 months. To my knowledge, there's not a tax treaty with Pakistan and the U.S. So
you will pay double or something.
Then you would basically owe double. Yeah, you would basically owe double. Yeah, it'd be pretty terrible. Yeah. So in that case, you have to decide, right? So in that case, you kind of have to decide, what am I going to do, right? Because it's not practical to pay double. So you might say, well, I'm not planning to go back to the U.S., so I'm going to give up my green card and just not pay. And then you lose your green card and your residency in the U.S. Now, that doesn't mean the U.S. doesn't consider that you owe it. They still claim that you owe that tax, but if you don't go back, you don't go back. So it's kind of.
Well, I suppose that there is another different situation for permanent travelers, people that leave the U.S., for example, and they are traveling to Asia 3 months, another 3 months to a different place. So you will have to do your normal taxes with the U.S., I suppose.
Not necessarily. No. If you were an American citizen, we're going to leave green card holders out of this because green card holders, of course, if they leave more than 6 months, they need to give up their green card anyway, and they can have it automatically revoked. So we're going to discuss this from a U.S. citizen perspective. If you're a U.S. citizen and you go, let's say, live in Thailand 3 months and Bali 3 months and I don't know, Japan 3 months or whatever, you can qualify for the foreign earned income exclusion. So you can earn about $110,000 plus you get a housing allowance which averages around 50 grand. So let's call it 150,000 just for simplicity's sake. So you can actually, if you qualify for the foreign earned income exclusion, doing that digital nomad thing, you can do that as an American. That works, but then you have to qualify for the FEIE, foreign earned income exclusion, under two different methods. So
you mean if you have already your income from the US in that case, and you are traveling? Okay.
It doesn't matter where your income is from.
Okay.
So if you're an American, technically you're taxed on worldwide income. It doesn't matter where you live. Okay, because it's a citizenship-based taxation. But you do have some exemptions. So you have the foreign earned income exclusion. And if you qualify for that, it's only earned income. So it's only like if you're earning profit from your business or a salary or something like that. What doesn't count is if you're earning dividends, capital gains, interest income, that sort of thing. All that income, any of that investment income, capital gains, dividends, royalties, interest income, any of that stuff, you can never ever go back to the US again, and you still have to pay tax on all that to the US. Okay. So if you're trading stocks and you make $100,000 a year in capital gains and dividends, and you haven't lived in the US for 20 years, you still have to file and pay tax on that income. 100% tax. You don't get any benefit there. The only benefit you get is on earned income earned through profit of your business or salary or, that sort of thing. But
so one question, the capital gains and the dividends, everything, you have to pay always in the US if you are a citizen?
Yes, correct.
Oh wow. So that is really bad. I mean, for someone that left the US for like 20 years or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad. If you're an investor, let's say you decide, let's say you're an investor in the US. You sell a company for a few $1 million, let's say $5 million, and you turn around and reinvest that money, and you're effectively retired. I mean, it's not big money retired, but you're retired. And let's say you're earning 5% a year on that 5 million. So you're making 250,000. And let's say it's some combination of dividends and capital gains and that sort of thing. You're going to pay, and let's say you decide, okay, I'm making this dividends and capital gains off the investment income. I'm going to go live around the world. I don't want to live in the US anymore. As long as you still maintain your US citizenship and that blue passport, you're going to pay full tax on that investment income back to the US.
Well, yes. This is another interesting thing because many people come here and sell the company like for millions of dollars, and some of the co-founders I have seen the history like they don't live in the US and they don't have the residence, so they pay in the original country, and maybe it's more beneficial. I don't know if you are going to sell your company, maybe it's better to be in Panama or in Bali or whatever. I don't know if it's.
It's certainly better to not live in the U.S. The one exception, of course, is Puerto Rico. It can be very beneficial if you live in Puerto Rico because they have a special tax situation there. They have Act 60. They're Act 60 companies and their tax laws related to that. So there is some benefits there, but that's the only exception for Americans. But yeah, if you were, let's say, a foreigner, what you call an NRA, a non-resident alien, and you have a company in the U.S. and you sell it, it's definitely better to not be a resident in the U.S.
Yeah.
Now, if you were an American and you were going to sell your company, you're much better off moving your company to Puerto Rico. But that means you also have to move to Puerto Rico.
Yeah. And well, I think that something interesting also is like the criteria to move to a different country, because many people haven't traveled a lot and they always think, oh, because I have lived like 20 years, the best education is in Spain, the best health system is in Spain. And later, if you travel the world, you realize like, I don't know, I can go Kuala Lumpur and they have a great health system, for example.
Right.
or Bali or Panama, and your income is from outside this good tax system, and they have good weather because it's sunny. I don't know. So, what do you think are the kind of criteria that people choose to live in one country or another, independently of the tax? Because I think that you said before, like normally when someone comes to you, you are going to recommend what is best, but I believe that sometimes people don't know that other countries can offer a lot of things. So sometimes it's good to know all the options before taking a decision, no? And say, well, maybe Asia is really good, but well, I don't know. If your customers maybe are in Asia or in the US or Latin America, maybe it's not too good. I don't know. There are many factors that you have to consider, no?
Well, for sure. I mean, first of all, you got to consider the person individually first, right? Like one of my best friends lives here in North Carolina. His idea of traveling is driving to the beach 3 hours away. Like he hates traveling. He doesn't like going anywhere. The idea for him to go to another country is already like mind blowing for him. He doesn't comprehend that. It doesn't work for him. So, and that's completely fine. He doesn't have a bad life. He has a great life and he has a very successful business. He does very well for himself. But the mentality of the person, I think, is critical, that you've got to be more of an adventurer and you've got to be more open-minded and you've got to be more like willing to kind of go with the flow, because I mean, you obviously have moved to a different country. I don't know before, but you've done it at least one time, right? And so you kind of know, like when you move to a new country, you always have to be prepared for the unexpected. You have to be prepared for some difficulties, some struggles. You know, there's always language barriers. There's definitely cultural barriers when you move to different countries. And a lot of these things are so uncomfortable for people that they just, like, I've seen a lot of expats, like especially American expats, they'll go live somewhere abroad for a year or two, and then they come back to the States because it was too hard for them. They just couldn't handle it. It was too, usually it's because of culture. Usually they can't take the culture, or, you know, they're so accustomed to having certain comforts in their life that when they go somewhere and exactly those comforts don't exist there, they can't do it. Maybe there's other things there that are much better than where they came from, but they don't want those other things, right? They don't even try to acclimate themselves culturally into that local environment. And so they just say, forget it, I'm going back home. So I think, first of all, it's got to be the mindset of a person who's willing to be adventurous and open-minded and willing to kind of go with the flow and things. I think that's, if you don't have that, this is not going to be the lifestyle you're going to be comfortable with, for sure. Second, as far as where to go, that's really difficult. You know, aside from the tax situation, because it does get complicated. I think you've got to, as they say, know thyself. You've got to know yourself. If you don't speak another language, you've got to figure out, like, do I want to go to a place where I'm not going to speak the language? Will I feel comfortable there? Am I willing to learn a new language? And, you know, if you're a native English speaker, maybe you just want to go to a place where there's lots of English speakers. Like, you know, for example, like Colombia has very little native English speakers. Like, even in Medellin, in the most touristy expat parts of town, it's still hard to find native English speakers, aside from like the expats and the tourists there. It's hard to find people, like you go to a shop or a restaurant, it's hard to find anybody speaking English. So if you are a native English speaker and you don't want to learn a new language, I would mark Colombia off the list. It's just not going to be a good option for you unless you're willing to dig in and learn Spanish. it's just not a great option, you just got to figure like certain things. You got to figure out what's right for you. Like, for me, like I've been in Ecuador, in Quito. I'm not comfortable in Quito. Like, I knew the moment I got there, I'm like, this is not my place. I don't like it. I don't feel comfortable here. I feel like a complete outsider from the very beginning. But actually, I felt very comfortable in Colombia. Like, Medellin, I felt completely comfortable. Bogota, I felt fine. But Quito, I did not feel good. So you have to kind of know yourself and know enough about yourself to kind of comprehend what you like, what you don't like, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do. Weather is another issue, right? Are you like Panama City? A lot of people say, I want to go to Panama City, but then maybe they don't realize how incredibly hot it is in Panama City in the summertime. Like, it's just crazy hot and humid. It can easily be 40, 42, even 45 degrees Celsius in the summertime, and very, very humid. Like, depends on what you like. Some people love that. Some people get there and they realize, oh my God, this is unbearable. I can't stand it.
Yeah,
So,
except that maybe they want to do like not being a permanent traveler a permanent traveler and being 3 months in Panama. For example, I don't like Miami too much in July or August because of the same reason. But
yeah,
or even Madrid is the 40 degrees in summer for Celsius.
Madrid's another one that's crazy hot, right? Especially in the summertime.
Yeah, so I would like to be more in, I don't know, Canary Islands, maybe. I don't know. Well, the taxes in Spain are not great. That is the only thing that are very similar to the US.
Well, okay, so that brings up another point then. The other thing is, it's always better to live as a tourist. So for you, being Spanish, I would never make anywhere in Spain like a home base. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you could go for
always less than 6 months, no, or something like that.
Yeah, or less. Yeah, but you, like, if you want to go to Canary Islands, you want to live in Tenerife for a couple of months, in the wintertime, I think that's fine. But don't make a home base in Spain. Just, you don't want that to be your home base, because you're already a Spanish citizen, Spanish passport holder, and it would have you too deeply connected to your home country from a tax standpoint. Unless there's other reasons you want to do it, but I'm talking about from a tax standpoint. But I think that's actually a pretty good rule, general rule. If you want to live this kind of expat or digital nomad lifestyle, you're an American, the United States should never be your home base, ever. Like, have another home base somewhere else. Maybe you like, I don't know, a lot of Americans like Costa Rica or Mexico. Some like Nicaragua and some of the nice expat communities.
Because I have seen, I talk with many people and they say, maybe I don't want my green card or my citizen from the US anymore because it was good to earn money in the US because I don't know, especially for people in Silicon Valley that they work for top companies like Google, Facebook, they pay really well. But at some moment they want to go away, and they are thinking even that. But sometimes it's like, oh, they have been 5 years to get the residence, and because it's hard to get it. So sometimes
Absolutely.
Also or if I change my idea or my plan in 2 or 3 years, like you say, you go back to Spain, but you have been living 10 years in the US, your mind have changed also. So how you adapt, maybe you want to come back. So that is the things, like if you want to do an exit plan, you know very well sometimes what it can be the best decision.
Yeah, obviously, getting a green card in the U.S. is not an easy thing to do, no doubt. It's one of the hardest countries in the world to immigrate to. Like, I can immigrate to Mexico by having a couple of $1,000s a month in income, and I can have my residence card in a couple of months. Super easy, right? I can immigrate to Spain quite easily as well. It's not hard. there's a ton of options to immigrate to Spain, but for a foreigner to immigrate into the U.S., it's not easy. And so there's an emotional connection there. Like it was so hard to get this green card, and it took me a long time and a lot of money and blah, blah, blah. Now I've got it. You have this connection like, man, I'm not sure I really want to give it up. Well, it's hard to answer that question. I mean, I can't answer that question. You have to kind of figure out for yourself what you want to do, where you want to spend your time. I would say we're living in this digital age where it's so much easier to make money and to make good money without having to be geographically bound. I'd say the U.S. doesn't have a big advantage for a place to live, considering you can still do business in the U.S. without living there, or you can even travel there and spend some time as a tourist, and you can do some business in a pocket of time while you're there.
Because I suppose another option would be you can create a company here and be a foreign investor of the company. And I
create U.S. companies for non-U.S. persons every week. I mean, it's common. Okay. Like I do a lot of U.S. company formations for non-U.S. Persons on a regular basis. Tons of my clients, more than half my clients are not Americans, mostly Europeans. More than half my clients are non-U.S. persons, most of them Europeans. And we're often registering companies for them in the U.S. They do big business in the U.S. and they don't live there. Yeah. But that, 20 years ago, that wasn't necessarily the same case, right? 20 years ago, we didn't have access to the technology tools that we have now that make this possible. And that's why I'm saying 20 years ago, there was a huge advantage to move to the U.S., get the green card, start the company, make a ton of money, and, build a big business and get rich, basically. But nowadays, you can do all of those things without actually living in the U.S. because technology makes that possible.
Yeah, we live.
So I don't see a huge advantage. Yeah. I just don't see a huge advantage to living in the U.S. anymore. I mean, I'm here, a few weeks a year, but that's it. I have an office here. I have an office in the States, but I don't ever go to it.
I don't know if I can answer. You are not a citizen anymore, no? From the U.S., no?
I am a U.S. citizen. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't see, at least right now, I don't see a disadvantage of giving up I don't see an advantage of giving up my U.S. citizenship because the way I've got things structured and planned, it's not a huge burden. But I'm not opposed to giving up my U.S. citizenship if it gets to the point where I feel that is.
I suppose that you have a structure like, I don't know. This was really fun when I see the Democrats now in the U.S. that they show all the salaries that they have and things like that, but you see that they have companies outside also. It's like, well, they want to increase the taxes and everything, but they still have the same structure like every kind of rich person. So it was funny when I was thinking. So I think that we are running almost out of time. I wanted to ask you only the last 3 questions that are more personal. That is usually to, like, for example, I always ask a kind of book that you get inspired or that you can recommend. I think you have any book that you have read recently that you can recommend to the audience?
A recent book.
No, it can be any book in your life.
I was going to say recently I've been reading a lot of science fiction, so Neil Stephenson books. So
it doesn't have to be about taxes or something like that.
I don't read books about taxes. You can only, as far as taxes go, you kind of have to research that as you go. There's not a lot of great books about taxes because by the time you write the book, it's probably invalid information. The amount of time it takes to write and publish a book, the laws have already changed by then. I don't know. I guess, from an influential standpoint, for sure, Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand was one of my most influential books I've ever read.
Which one? Sorry,
Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand.
Okay,
Atlas Shrugged. It's definitely one of my most influential books. I don't consider myself an objectivist, and of course, I don't agree with all of her viewpoints, but it was definitely an influential book and got me kind of thinking in different ways. So I like that.
Another, any person in your life that it has been a big influence for you, like, I don't know, it can be anyone. So.
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, influential person in my life.
Or inspirational, I don't know.
I mean, that, you know, I read a lot, so I find like I get a lot of influence from authors of books, as far as like individual mentors and that sort of thing. I mean, yeah, I have some individual mentors, but I'm not going to mention them on here. Of course, you know, I think I was somewhat fortunate to be raised in a more entrepreneurial family, so I can give some credit to that to my dad, as being an influence on kind of not raising me in like a lot of my friends at the time who were raised to, you know, go to college, get the corporate job and work your way up the ladder kind of mentality, because to me that type of lifestyle seems pretty soul draining. But I don't know. Maybe it's a great life because I've never lived it. But to me, it seems, at least for my personality, it seems like it would be kind of soul draining.
It seems also that you are not thinking to retire because you're always doing things that you really enjoy. I mean, there are people that like to follow FIRE, this movement about financial independence retire early. But I could not just put doing things after 40s. No, it will be very boring. No, only something that you really enjoy. No,
that FIRE movement is kind of interesting. I got a lot of friends that are interested in that, and it's kind of an interesting idea. But I kind of, you know, you have to take pieces of what makes sense for you, like the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. But what does retire actually mean for you, right? What does that mean to retire? To me, what it means is like I have the ability to make choices because of my financial independence. I might choose to start this new business, or I might choose to do consulting, or I might choose to do this, but I don't choose them out of a necessity to make a paycheck to keep a roof over my head and food in the kitchen every week, right? And so I don't. Whereas if you're not financially independent, a lot of your choices are money driven. It's why honestly you see most of the greed in people with less money. Actually, greed is more prevalent in people with less money because they have more immediate need for earning that money right then, because you know they need it right now. Whereas a lot of times you see wealthy people they're not that greedy, they're not that money focused, because they've already met, what is it, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They've already met all their like basic human needs. And so that gives them the mental and emotional freedom to make better choices. Whereas if you're not meeting your basic human needs, a lot of times you're making choices out of greed because you need money, right, to pay the rent.
And the last question will be any habit that you have adopted recently. It can be anything, like I don't know, some people. Well, not recently. I mean, in your life, like
any what I've adopted?
Habit, like for example, some people decide to wake up early. Other people decide to run. Other people try this kind of diets, the ketogenic. I don't know, any kind of thing can be that you adopted and you.
I have started running lately. The past couple of months, I've been running a couple of times a week. And then I recently changed my workout. I'm using this, it's called an X Bar Elite. the letter X, BAR, Elite. I changed my workout to using this X Bar Elite. It's kind of an interesting workout. It's a short workout. It only takes about 15 minutes, but you do it almost every day of the week. And it really, you basically work your muscles out to failure in a very short period of time. So I just changed my workout to this. And also it's good because it's a piece of equipment that's easy to travel with. It's a bar and a set of resistance bands. So it's easy because I travel a lot. It's easy to throw it in the luggage and carry it with you and your not carry on, but your check bag.
Yeah, you have your kind of a small gym everywhere. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I have changed my workout to using this. So that's another relatively recent habit.
I have been using a lot the bars, but probably it's not the same because you don't have the bar. But yeah,
you should check this thing out, X Bar Elite. It's a good one.
I will check it. Yeah. So thank you so much, Bobby, for your time. It was a pleasure to meet you. All the best, and I'm glad that you are helping people to do this, because I think that is very important, because we don't have this kind of education and we don't know about all this stuff.